We need to talk. Don't you hate it when somebody starts a conversation like that? It's like you're already in trouble and you didn't even do anything. Okay, so this video is a little bit different because we're going to talk about, yes, we're going to talk about the Honda EU3200i. And it's really more about if you should buy this generator and a little bit more of an in-depth conversation about it. That way, if you do spend your hard-earned money on it, because it's not a cheap purchase. It is literally $25.99 depending on where you buy it. Then if you add tax, and some locations are still charging $27.99 for this. So by the time you're out the door with tax, you're pretty much at $3,000. So now, do you spend $3,000 on this unit, or do you consider something else? Now, of course, Honda does have their long reliability, which that seems like it's starting to fade a little bit, because the more people you talk to in forums, you also talk to mechanics and more, it seems like they're not like they used to be 15 to 20 years ago, where they were pretty much bulletproof. You could leave them outside in the rain, they would run all the time, it didn't matter, they just worked, and that's what Honda was known for. But now, if you pay attention to more in the forums, and you look at more of what they're talking about with some of the larger generators and the newer ones, kind of like the EU2200i, it seems like the EU2000 was one of the last ones that just kind of ran forever, and the EU3000is. That thing is a tank and pretty much bulletproof, except for some of the newer generations, those last model builds, I think. I actually sold mine, my EU3000, because it said my inverter board was no longer able to be purchased. And I looked for a superseded number, but there was nothing that I could get to replace that if it did go out. So I ended up selling it while it was still good. It had about, I think, 700 to 800 hours on it, ran great. So that thing is now gone. I still have my EU2200i, both of those, and now I have this one. And I've purchased all of these with my own money, so just so you guys know. Now, in order to get this one, I actually had to have it smuggled into California because there just wasn't any available. And when these came out, it was kind of towards the end of that pandemic. And so I ended up buying this brand new in the box for $2,200 because somebody had bought it and then they realized they didn't really need it. So they took a big financial hit already to purchase this unit. And now I'm already seeing on Facebook Marketplace, I'm already seeing on Craigslist as well, people who are selling these brand new generators for anywhere from $1,800 to about $2,400, brand new in the box. The $1,800 one I saw had like 5 hours on it. They just realized they didn't need this type of a generator, or they wanted something that was like a dual fuel, which I highly recommend those to people who are looking at one, just because a dual fuel generator always gives you another option when you have a problem. So when the gas doesn't work on this, like if you get a carburetor that's plugged or something happens, normally propane will still work because it completely bypasses the carb. It just uses a hole, it goes through the venturi body, and that's about it, right into the intake, and then it's into the engine. So the carburetor is just a main connection point, and that's it. If it doesn't work, or if it's completely rusted out, dual fuel still works, which I wish Honda would do a dual fuel unit. Everything is gas. I don't understand why they don't do that. But now when it comes to this unit, again, $3,000, let's say you just $2,800, we'll leave it at that. And of course, the Honda boys are going to say that, you know, it runs forever, 10, 15, 20 years, who knows, right? And I can still get parts for the next 10 or 15 years. Well, and that's true. You can for most of them, except for like my EU3000. But what happens is that, let's say you get towards a 60 to 70% of life out of this unit, whether it's 5,000 hours, 7,500 hours, and then you decide, well, I don't really know how to work on this unit myself. It's going to cost about $900 to $1,000 to have it fixed, whatever it is, because labor rates are high, and if you're not mechanically inclined, well, a shop is going to charge you a lot of money to work on this, and the parts are kind of expensive right now because, well, they're still new. So now it ends up looking like, well, is it worth to put the money back into this generator that's towards its end of life, or should you just sell it and get a brand new something else? So that's kind of one of the discussions. So now when it comes to this unit, this is the parts that I was looking at, and also how easy it is to work on this. So when it comes to the fuel injector, that's actually pretty easy to get out. And if you did have it get plugged, you could probably take it to a fuel injection shop They'll probably charge you maybe $40 depending on where you go to have it cleaned, and that'll take what, a couple days. If you were to buy the fuel injector brand new plus a O-ring and maybe a couple other little pieces, it's going to be a little over $100 just for the fuel injector. Now, if you had a EU2200i, well, that carburetor is only about $60 for a brand new one. And most of the time you can just clean it because it's the jets that get plugged. So, and herein lies another problem is that, let's say the fuel pump went out, right? So that's one of the problems that they're having with the fuel injected EU7000i. Those guys are not even getting 500 hours out of them. Now, sure, those are only the ones that you see that break, and then there's probably people that have, thousands of hours on them, because I've seen several of those with 8, 9, 10,000 hours, and I've asked them, hey, how many problems have you had? And they usually say minimal to none. I've seen more and more in the forums, group pages, and comments that I get on my channel and more. Fuel pump goes out, something with the injector, ignition coil, and a couple other problems. And so those become expensive products, like the fuel pump in this one. If you had to replace a fuel pump, it's going to cost about $260. This is from like Honda dealership parts and stuff. It's about $260 for that part. And you have to take a majority of this thing apart. The whole case has to come off and everything, because the fuel pump is inside the tank. So that becomes kind of a big job for the average person who may not really be mechanically inclined to take this whole thing apart. If you are, it's probably not too bad of a job. I'd say maybe 2 hours you could have this thing all the way disassembled, put it back together. Another one of the things too is that some people really love Yamaha because it's a push rod motor, right? So this one being a timing belt, just like the EU2200i, it's not terribly hard to replace a timing belt on those ones. It still requires a decent amount of knowledge and disassembly, but the part's like, what, $15 for a timing belt. But in order to take this one apart, you were looking at almost a full disassembly on this motor. It is not an easier one to just take a section apart, replace a timing belt. This one requires, I think you have to split the case and everything, from a couple mechanics I talked to, and also looking at the fish finder and more, and just digging around in here in general. So now let's say that happens at 2,000 or 3,000 hours, right? It's something really low, because it does. It's a machine. They can break, and depending on how you treat it, if you are running it at full throttle all the time, it's really hot where you use it all the time, it's going to wear faster. That's just a general thing. It doesn't matter what machine it is, a car, a boat, whatever. But now you take this in to have somebody work on it. Let's say you take it to Honda, you have them work on it. Their labor rate is $120 to $150 an hour. In order for them to take this apart, put a timing belt in, put it back together, gaskets, parts, sealants, whatever else they're going to charge you, you're looking at, let's say we'll do $125 an hour on the low end, and you times that by probably a 6 to 8 hour job, because I don't know actually what the R&R is to do a timing belt on this yet, but I bet it's probably 6 hours to do that. So there's 6, 7, 8, 900. There's $1,000 right there that you just spent on this. And depending on how many hours you have, again, is it worth it to put the money into it, or just go get another one? It's, I've had people tell me, well, I can buy those parts, for 10 years or more. And then they end up saying, well, would you put parts into a car that has 250,000 miles, or would you just kind of move on and sell it dirt cheap and move on to something else? Now, I have tested this generator a lot too. If you've seen some of my other videos, I did an elevation test on this. I did a full load test, and I've ran it for a few hours, but I'm waiting for another fuel injection generator to actually get here, which I should see that pretty soon. When it comes to the performance of this, there's no doubt it actually runs really well. It starts like on the first pull. It is super easy. It's very basic. You don't really get any frills like you do with some of the other brands that you can get, like the China ones or whatever. When it comes to like Champion or Wind generators, those are basically the same units, but those are really good. And you could buy one of those 4,500 watt dual fuels for about $1,200, give or take. The Wind is actually a lot cheaper, around like $700 or $800, but they're also quite a bit heavier. You're looking at a 95 to 100 pound generator versus this one is about 65 pounds. So those are other options you can consider, but you get a lot more power out of it. You also get a much larger fuel cell, so your run times are going to be a lot longer. So that's sometimes the things you have to think about. It's $3,000. That's a lot of money for some people. So you have to think, is this generator going to serve all your needs? Do you want something small and compact, or do you really need more power? Now, if you want it for like RV purposes, I do a lot of my testing with that for when we go camping and whatnot. But if you are going to buy one of these, I highly suggest looking at Facebook or take a look at Craigslist. I am seeing more and more, and I'm just in California where we didn't even get these until recently. So I'm seeing them for, again, around $1,800 to $2,300, $2,400, depending on, condition and where it is and whatever. But now, what about other options like the Honda 2200, right? I did an elevation test on those, and I mean, I can find a 2200, the EU3200i series Bluetooth model, $800 to $900 almost all day long. And there's actually several listed right now on Facebook Marketplace, and they have like 20, 30, 50, maybe even 100 hours. And if you can pick it up for $800, that's a heck of a savings. And maybe it doesn't have the warranty, but I mean, both of the EU2200i's, actually one of them I bought brand new. The other one, the companion one, I bought with, it has 6 hours on it. And I bought that one for $850. So I don't mind buying used because being a mechanic, I know what to look for. I don't mind working on the stuff, but I wouldn't want to work on this. As far as like the timing belt, I don't want to do that stuff anymore. I'm getting lazier. But so two 2200s will give you more power. There's a lot more parts, and the parts are super cheap for those because they've been around a long time. So, again, if you could find one of these for 2200, or if you get two of the smaller models at $800 each, maybe they're used at $1,600, and then you could buy the extended run fuel tank, which they are in the process of making an extended run fuel tank for this model right now, and it might actually be completed by the time you watch this video. And they're also making a dual fuel kit, so you can run this off of propane, which I don't know how well that's going to work. I'm still waiting for it. I was going to test it, but I haven't seen anything yet, so hopefully it's almost done. So again, when it comes to pros on this unit, it starts super quick. It's not the quietest. It's probably just as loud as maybe a Champion 4500, because the Champion's in a bigger box. It has a little bit more engine damping it can do. It also runs lower RPM versus this. This is the highest RPM Honda that you'll find. None of them run this high. The EU2200 runs around that 3600 mark. This is like 4800, 4850. So, and being that it is a high performance motor, that's what it's labeled as. It's allowed to run those high RPMs, but everybody knows anything that runs more revolutions per minute, you're gonna wear stuff out faster. That's just facts. So that's why diesel engines run so long, because they're sitting there chugging along at 1500 to 2000 RPM. But now, as far as cons, it's going to have just a small fuel cell. It still runs, for most people long enough, and you add a little bit of fuel in the morning, it'll run all day, then you add a little bit more at night before you fire it up if you need to run it that long. But I don't know what you guys think as far as what are your thoughts on this? Is it really worth, if you wanted to buy it new, $2,600, $2,800, whatever it's going to be? Or is it really just better to buy, a couple used Honda 2200s? If I was going to sell the 2200s or this, I would sell this first over the 2200s, because again, the parts are super cheap for that. It's a lot easier to work on, and they're pretty flawless. Those little guys are super quiet too. Those are the quietest ones out there. You can't really find anything quieter. So when it comes to generators, Honda, unfortunately, I think kind of sold themselves short. One, because the price was just so darn high. And this could have had just a little bit more to it. I mean, it could have even had a higher running watts too. Now, whether you guys agree with this video or not, I'm kind of curious as to what you guys think, but I hope you guys liked the video, and thanks for sticking around and hanging out for a little bit. I hope to see you next time.